There is a moment that stays with you, not the big ones, not the wedding day, not the births, not the milestones everyone tells you to remember. It is a small, quiet moment, a Tuesday morning, a hand that stopped being warm, and a silence so complete it felt like the whole world had forgotten to breathe. My name is Arthur. I am 80 years old, and I am only now beginning to understand that I was never, not once in 54 years, prepared for the morning she was gone. Margaret and I met in the autumn of 1965. I was 26 years old, working at a printing company downtown. The kind of job that paid enough to feel like progress, but not enough to feel like arrival. She was 23, standing at a bus stop on a Thursday evening with a book tucked under her arm, and absolutely no interest in being spoken to. I spoke to her anyway. I do not know what made me do it. I was not a particularly bold young man. But something about the way she stood there, calm, self-contained, like she needed nothing from the world around her, made me feel that if I let that bus take her away, I would spend the rest of my life wondering. She gave me exactly 4 words that evening. She said, "You talk too much." And then she got on the bus. I stood on that pavement for a full minute after the bus disappeared, and I was smiling. I did not know why. I just was. I found her again 3 weeks later through a mutual friend who thought the whole thing was funny. We had coffee. Then we had dinner. Then we had 54 years. It sounds simple when you say it like that. 54 years. As though it were a number. As though you could hold it in your hand and weigh it. You cannot. What you can do is stand in a quiet kitchen on a winter morning with a cup of tea you made for 2 out of pure habit, and feel the full weight of every single one of those years pressing down on you at once. Margaret was not a dramatic woman. That is one of the first things I want you to understand about her, because I think it matters. She did not fill a room with her presence the way some people do. She did not demand your attention. What she did, and I only see this clearly now looking back, was create a kind of steadiness around her that everything else in your life could lean against. Our children felt it. Our grandchildren felt it. I felt it every single day for over 5 decades, and I was so accustomed to it that I stopped noticing it entirely. That is the honest truth. I stopped noticing it, and I think that is the thing that sits heaviest with me now. Not that I loved her any less, but that I loved her the way you breathe air, completely, constantly, and without the slightest awareness of what life would feel like without it. She was diagnosed in the spring of her 77th year, pancreatic cancer. The doctor who told us was a young man, careful and kind, and he used words that were measured and professional, and I heard all of them and understood none of them. Margaret sat very still beside me. On the drive home, she looked out the window for a long time, and then she said quietly, "Well, I suppose we had better make the most of the time we have." And that was Margaret. That was entirely, completely Margaret. No performance, No collapse, just a quiet decision to keep moving forward with whatever dignity the situation allowed. We had 14 months after that diagnosis. I want to be honest about those 14 months because I think people sometimes turn that kind of time into something cleaner than it actually is. There were beautiful moments, yes. There were evenings on the back porch watching the light change, and Sunday lunches with the children that felt deliberately, painfully precious. There were conversations we had never had in 53 years of marriage that we finally had in that 14th month about things that mattered and things that did not, and things we had both been quietly carrying for decades. I am grateful for those conversations. I will be grateful for them until the last day of my life. But there were also hard days when the medication made her feel far away from herself. Days when the woman sitting in the chair across from me looked like Margaret but felt unreachable, as though there were already a distance growing between us that no amount of closeness could close. I did not know how to be with that. I kept trying to do things. To fix meals, to arrange appointments, to solve practical problems. Because doing things was the only language I had ever known for love. Margaret used to look at me on those days with an expression I can only describe as patient, as though she understood something about me that I did not yet understand about myself. She was always ahead of me that way. Even at the end, especially at the end. She died on a Thursday morning in late October. The leaves outside the bedroom window were that particular shade of amber that she had always loved, and the light was soft and unhurried, and the room was very quiet. Our daughter was there. I was there. The nurse who had been with us through those final weeks was there, a woman named Patricia who had a gentle way of moving through a room that I will always be grateful for. Margaret's breathing had changed through the night, slower, with longer spaces between each breath, and by morning those spaces had grown so wide and so still that the next breath simply never came. I held her hand. I want to tell you something true about that moment, and I want to say it plainly without making it larger than it was. It was not like the films. There was no dramatic final word, no last declaration. She had not been conscious enough for words for nearly 2 days. What there was just a hand in my hand, and then a stillness. And then the quiet understanding that the hand I was holding was no longer Margaret, that she had gone somewhere I could not follow, and that everything, every ordinary Tuesday, every unfinished sentence, every cup of tea, every year, had now divided itself permanently into before and after. The weeks that followed are difficult to describe with any precision. People came, people said things, people brought food and sat in the living room and said her name in soft voices, and I was present for all of it in the way that you can be present in a body while being nowhere near it. What I remember most from those weeks is not the people or the words or even the funeral, which was a good funeral, attended by people who had genuinely loved her. What I remember most is the mornings, specifically the moment each morning when I woke up, that single half-second before full consciousness, before memory, when nothing had happened yet, and then the moment after, when it all came back. That transition, that small, brutal passage from not knowing to knowing, happened every single morning for months. Some days I think it still happens. Some days I think it will never fully stop. People asked me in those early months how I was managing, and I told them I was fine because that was what the situation required and because I did not have the words for anything more honest. The honest answer was that I did not know how to be a person in a house that had been built for two. Every room held something, not dramatically. Not the way grief looks in stories, with objects clutched and tears falling, just quietly. A chair angled the way she preferred it, a particular mug she always chose, a handwriting on a shopping list inside a kitchen drawer that I could not bring myself to throw away and could not bring myself to read. What I understand now, and I want to say this carefully because I think it is the truest thing I know, is that grief is not a feeling you move through and come out the other side of. It is not a tunnel with an exit. It is something that becomes part of the structure of your days. It becomes the way certain hours feel heavier than others. It becomes the reflex of turning to say something to someone who is no longer there. It becomes eventually something you carry not with agony, but with a kind of quiet constancy, a presence inside the absence. And in that presence, if you are still enough, you can sometimes feel the shape of who they were. Not as a memory exactly, something more like a temperature in the room. I am 80 years old. I have lived long enough to know that there is very little wisdom available to a person before they have lived enough to need it. I could not have told you any of this at 40. I could not have told you this at 60. There are things that only loss teaches, and it teaches them slowly and without any kindness in the teaching. What I can tell you, the one thing I would say to anyone sitting here watching me, at whatever age, in whatever life, is this: notice the ordinary days, not the remarkable ones. Not the celebrations or the milestones or the moments you already know to hold on to, the Tuesday mornings, the quiet evenings, the unremarkable conversation over a meal that you will not remember having. Notice those, be inside them, because there will come a day for all of us when we would give everything we have left just to live one of them again. Margaret would have found this video very strange, I think. She was a private woman, and she would have raised an eyebrow at me sitting here talking about our life to people I have never met. But she also believed, in her quiet way, that people needed to hear the truth from each other more than they needed almost anything else. So I think she would have allowed it. I think she might even, in her way, have approved. And that thought, small as it is enough to keep me going for another day, which is, at 80 years old, exactly as much as any of us can honestly ask for.